Hello, Baker Economics students. Hope everybody had a good weekend. We are now in week 3, so we're quickly approaching the halfway point of the course. And week 4, you get a little bit of a break. You just have a quiz that week. I did that on purpose so you can enjoy the Thanksgiving break a little bit, but still continue to work on future papers when you get downtimes and opportunities. So an overview of this week, you're going to read chapters 6 and 10 dealing with elasticity and utility theory. You'll have your forum discussion. You'll do your quizzes in the Pearson My Econ Lab for 6 and 10. And you have your first paper due. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the paper to give you some insights, things to think about. If you look at the syllabus, it says 5 to 6 pages. Um, if you need to go over that, you can go over that. I'm not requiring you to go over that. And that can also include your cover page and your references page as that page total. But really what I'm looking for you to is address those questions that are in the assignment. So it talks about the benefit, good or service, meaty consumer. I'll just pull out Hershey's chocolate as an example. Obviously it's candy, so it's the consumer that enjoys chocolate and satisfaction of consuming the chocolate. They do have some amusement. They have one amusement park and some other maybe side things, but for the most part, they're a chocolate factory. And then if you think about go back to that utility chapter and definitely use your textbook for this. And also, I would suggest the subject guides at the Baker Library under business. You might be able to find some resources in there looking up that company. And again, I encourage you to choose a publicly traded company. It's just going to be a lot easier to find information. But if you want to use a private company, that's okay too. Just make sure you can find some sources for it. And then go through what type of substitutes, complementary goods, and normal inferior to discuss that. This goes back to how it ties into elasticity that you're going to read about in chapter 6. Talks back to supply and demand, the input factors, because think about how these things in competition could impact this particular good. Again, going back to Hershey, there's other competitors like M&M Mars, and think about this year, and with COVID-19, nobody doing Halloween, how that impacted them. So, and then to what degree are the good or service price elastic or price inelastic? And this would be more general terms. You don't need to calculate this, but certain goods are going to be more inelastic, such as gasoline. People are going to need it no matter what. So in general, it's inelastic with gasoline. But what interesting thing about a market with gasoline is that they compete right against each other at the same price. So they're also sensitive. They're elastic and sensitive that they can't charge a lot more than what the competitor does. So really look at think about the pricing strategies for your firms. Who is some of the competition? How do they take that in consideration? But in general, what is the nature of the elasticity of this product? Is this something that people highly need? It's high demand, or are there a lot of substitutes available for this good? And if so, it's going to be much more elastic. But if it's something like my public utility company, Evergy, not many people have their own solar panels or live off the grid, so they're dependent on it. So in general, electricity is highly inelastic, but people can still be sensitive to prices and try to find ways to reduce their energy costs through different alternatives. So, and then finally describing taxation, government intervention, and consumer demand and price. It can be specific to the product. It can be specific to anything. I mean, all industries are heavily regulated in the production of their goods and services. Think about those things. Just think about your HR department. Sometimes it drives me nuts at MCCKC where I work, all the HR rules and regulations, but there are certain rules that we have to follow. Federal FERPA, I have to follow that with you guys, Federal Education Rights and Privacy Acts. Some firms have to do HIPAA if they're in health insurance. So think about those things go beyond just the, including maybe the local market, but also or a national market. But what types of regulations are involved? Because there's usually always some type of government regulation specific to an industry that any manager has to be aware of. So hopefully that gives you some insights. But I want to give you that was the major assignment this week, and I'll give some more insights as we go on to the other papers throughout the week. So, all right, I do want to touch on some of the concepts. I took some notes here. First, we'll start with chapter 6. You're going to look at the elasticity of demand, the elasticity of supply, Most of the focus is on the elasticity demand. Obviously, as a manager, you are concerned about how sensitive my consumers are to any price changes. And when again, the goal is try to maximize revenues and ultimately to maximize profits. So by technical definition, or simple, let's just start off simple definition. Elasticity demand is just the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change of price. And it is a percentage change. And one way I want you to think about this, if I go from um, 10 units to 20 units, that's a 100% increase. But if I go from 100 to 110 units, it's still a 10 unit change, but it's a 10% increase. So that's how elasticity is calculated. We think about moving along a particular demand curve, the elasticity is going to change along that demand curve too. But most textbooks look at what's called arc price elasticity. It's an average of those prices along a given range and the average of the quantities along these given ranges. And do managers sit there, most managers sit there and calculate elasticity demand? No. But they are aware of these things. And they use different strategies like cost plus pricing. Now, big corporations probably do have they have economists they can hire that can measure these things through multiple regressions. But there are different strategies, just from the mom and pop shop to a Hy-Vee that I think uses technology. Hy-Vee is a local grocery store that you scan your barcode along the checkout line. They are gathering all kinds of information about you. And if you've, this Christmas time, I don't know if you've done this in the past, if you've ever filled out one of those surveys and they kind of threaten you that, hey, you need to fill this out to have it like warranty. You don't have to, but they asked information about your income level, what other products you were thinking about, and they asked you to send it back in. But, businesses try to get as much information about you to try to figure you out. And that's kind of, I guess, where the internet watches us now and everything we buy and the suggestions and the cookies that pops up. It kind of ties into chapter 10. They can be very good at predicting what you're wanting to buy and send marketing to you directly to try to change your demand towards a particular product. That's another kind of say for chapter 10. But anyway, there's also elasticity of supply. Businesses, their decisions to make supply to the market. If a demand curve is very inelastic, it's going to be very steep. It doesn't change very much. If it's very flat, it's very elastic. Same thing can be supply, can be very inelastic or can be very elastic. So you're going to read about those things. You're also going to read about income elasticity. As someone's income goes up, what's the percentage change of that good demanded? If it goes up, when income goes up, it's a normal good. If it goes down, it's a inferior good. Remember, I was in graduate school, very poor back in the early 90s. I would live on Aldi's spaghetti sauce and Aldi's pasta. It's not the best quality pasta sauce or spaghetti, but it was an inferior good. Probably many people remember the ramen noodles in college. But as your incomes went up, you could afford to buy better beer, better food products, and you buy normal goods. So cross-price elasticity just tells you a little bit whether this good you're looking at examining is a substitute or complementary good. So think about it this way: if the price of Lucky Charms goes up and the quantity demanded Magic Puffs increases, we would say, oh, it's a substitute good. But if you think about like gasoline, if the price of gasoline goes up and the demand for big trucks and SUVs goes down, it's like, okay, this is a complementary type of good. So you'll be reading about those things and kind of examining a lot of those concepts. So, okay, last chapter, chapter 10, just want to kind of give you some of the key concepts here. You're dealing with what we call a theory, utility theory. And utility theory was actually first discussed by a classical economist, Jeremy Bentham. He kind of reminded me of Christopher Lloyd in the movie Back to the Future. He's kind of a wacky guy. And the reason I say that is because I remember Christopher Lloyd in the movie. If you've ever seen Back to the Future, he kind of puts this thing on Marty's head and tells me what you were thinking. Well, Jeremy Bentham came up with this idea that if you ate it like a cheeseburger, it would produce some amount of utils that we could measure. And in economics, we measure utility as a level of happiness. But for all of you, as we consume different goods and services, there is some level of happiness or satisfaction that we get out of it. Ideally, we all have budget constraints. I give my wife a budget constraint. She gets more money than me, but she can make a choice on a budget constraint between maybe if it's $200 and pairs of shoes are $20 and lunches are $10, she can decide how to allocate those choices. But ideally, in theory, you're going to allocate those choices of all goods and services to maximize your level of happiness or overall satisfaction. We don't always make the best choices at times. You buy something later and you're like, oh, why did I buy this? So it's hard. That's why you try to gather information about it. But in theory, you continue to buy those things, and as you buy things, the marginal utility is declining. So a lot of this chapter is talking about the marginal utility of good X to the price of good X, the marginal utility of good Y to the price of good Y, and how we switch between goods and services. And it ties into the law of demand too, because as I'm consuming more of this good, I'm moving along the demand curve, you're going to have to lower the price in order for me to want to consume more of it. But one thing I would share with you all, just your own personal lives and kind of the way that economists think and the way I think, you have three choices in life: the choice to work, the choice to consume, and the choice for leisure. And if you believe in modern portfolio theory, and kind of this is more on personal finance and everything you think about estate planning, tax planning, retirement, risk management with insurance, health insurance, all these choices that you have in life. Ideally, you kind of want this to be a smooth ride all the way up, to retirement to enjoy that. But so often people kind of go like this, up and down. A lot of Americans. So it's there's an interesting video if I can find that. It was called "Less Is More" by Graham Moore. It was put out years ago. I thought it was such a great YouTube video, TED Talks video, because sometimes we consume so much and then later we realize that we had more money to do other things, so you got to ask that question: is this truly going to make me happy? But why it's so important to understand utility theory, especially you as those masters in business students, is because it's very powerful. And people make choices based on the quality of the products, what they perceive, and you're trying to get them to buy your product or service. So you can use some of those things to try to influence behaviors. Everything like just how shopping markets put things on end caps and how information is framed and presented to you. There was a great video years ago. It's getting a little bit dated. I think it was called Mind Over Money, but it talked about different economists, and there's still a debate whether people are truly rational or are they irrational. And the behavioral economists would say that sometimes people are irrational. It's kind of after the subprime crisis. Like, why would people make these choices about leveraging themselves so much on houses and putting themselves in the mortgages they could never afford? But rational economists would say at that time they were presented with low interest rates and information that they would make these choices. Well, now, to give you a quick example, behavioral economics, they've done experiments with this at University of Chicago. If you do just something just at random, just ask people to put the last two digits of their social security down and then present them with a bottle of wine and how much you would willing to pay for it, those with the highest social security numbers were willing to pay more. And they repeated this experiment over and over again. So just be conscious when you're getting the marketing in the mail, you're getting the marketing on the television, or you're presenting in a store and how they frame things. It's all in an effort to try to increase your purchasing behavior or switch you to a particular product. And there are many that do believe that behavioral economics is real and it influences business activity. Just the last one I remember, like I'll give you that Hy-Vee example. I grew up listening to the 80s. Well, every time I go shop at Hy-Vee, they got that 80s movie cranked up. And there'd be psychologists that will tell you that when people relate that to their past, and they tend to buy more, where then it was just a quiet environment. So it's all well thought out and purposeful when they do these things. So, okay. Well, I don't want to go too long this week, but there was a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. But you'll read more about the income effect and substitution effect. And the income effect basically says as the price falls, you can consume more. But even if price differences occur between goods, and if I were giving you additional money to say something became more expensive, you may still substitute. That's where the substitution effect comes in, because of relative prices and the choices that you make. So, all right, well, hopefully this week the market will have a good week. We'll see what happens. A lot of concerns still about COVID. Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, last week kind of gave some concerns in the market, because he said that the way the market is, where our economy is headed in the future is going to be totally different. And it's just something we're going to have to deal with and get used to. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 years. Hopefully, there'll be a future stimulus package of some kind. But it's going to be a rough time for some Americans. And we're just going to have to see how this plays out. The vaccine gave some good news, but they're still concerned with the high COVID cases. So In the long run, this will be over with. It's a temporary bump or traffic stop in our economy's history, but it is an adjustment for a lot of people. But if you do have any questions, just shoot me an email. And otherwise, have a great week, and I will talk to you online.